My name is Yves, CEO and Cloud Evangelist for the Comdivision Group. We are going to talk about VSAN quite a bit, I think. So we primarily use VSAN for cloud automation. So we provide test workloads for specific test use cases for customers who want to do software testing or something like that. And in that specific case, we also use VSAN because it gives us flexibility from a profile perspective on how we roll out specific workloads and specific test scenarios. It's making it easier for us to actually deploy things in comparison to legacy storage platforms. For us, VSAN gives us a lot of advantages when we need to expand resources. So we have an overall larger host infrastructure and we split that up for specific customer test and use cases. And in that specific scenario, we can easily actually add more hosts or reduce the number of hosts in the environment. And that is an advantage when we use VSAN. On the other side, we have pretty constant performance results, which is sometimes on a normal 3-tier storage architecture harder for us to achieve because the customer doesn't want us to verify that the performance of a specific device works. What we typically have to test is that we have a constant scenario across different versions and platforms and similar things. And there VSAN gives us the advantage that we can actually work with that. We can also create test cases, which is maybe not something in other customer scenarios, but for us it's important we can even throttle down performance or actually release more performance. So we can run more precise test scenarios. So if someone says we need to run this later on a relatively small or lower scaled edge device, we can actually configure VSAN in a way that it actually reduces the amount of resources. On the other side, when we need to do more scaled load testing, we can actually run more dense workloads and still have the same results across all specific nodes, whereas otherwise we could have that more or less noisy neighbor effect when we were to use legacy hardware. The way VSAN improved our organization was that we could actually deploy scenarios and deploy workloads much more easily because from a VSAN perspective, I don't need to reconfigure underlying storage or anything else. I can actually adjust for each individual machine the individual workload characteristics and don't have to deal with different type of disk shelves and RAID groups and everything like that. We can directly take that out of the box. Stability, within VSAN, we had some issues in the very early releases and it has become much better over time. Stability with VSAN has come its way. When we look at 5.5, then 6.0, 6.2, 6.6, it has moved ahead every time. Clearly 5.5 and 6.0 had its issues, but it's constantly improving. And we need to keep in mind that we are talking about a relatively new technology. And whenever you are adopting something early on, you need to live with the fact that potentially not everything runs as smooth as you would expect it to be. But we can see the progress with VSAN, and that's one of the reasons why we built our platforms. Scalability with VSAN, I touched base that quickly before. Scalability is for us, it's an important part because we resize clusters all the time in our environment. So we clean them out and actually start from scratch. And with VSAN, it's easier for us to add nodes. So if in a test scenario we are building, we currently might have only 4 or 5 nodes in the beginning. If we add more, it's an easy add-on for us. It's easier for us to manage it that way than, again, like with legacy storages where we would have to add additional disk shelves or something like that. So tech support with VSAN, it's a mixed relationship there. We had issues with tech support because sometimes and I think that's a VMware generic issue. VMware comes out of the software-defined space, and in the software-defined space, you start off with the approach that you can basically tell the customer to change everything. VSAN, however, is a different approach. It's a storage platform. I cannot just actually say, oh, you need to upgrade everything or replace everything. And that sometimes had been a bit of a challenge with the support teams to explain to them, no, it's not an option that we completely upgrade the stack. We need to get a different fix for it. That, however, again, over the last few years has improved, and I think VMware gets the story now that doing support on the storage side is different than for a lot of the other software products. So again, I think we are getting there, but it could definitely improve. So from a setup perspective with VSAN, I was involved in the original architecture and the design of our specific platform. and it was pretty straightforward. It's more or less point and click. The most challenging part is actually choosing the correct hardware and the correct platform behind it. It's not so much about the fact of how to deploy VSAN. Once the physical hardware is there, ESXi is installed, configuring VSAN is pretty straightforward. It's just a few clicks. It's much easier than most other storage platforms. But the challenge is to identify the correct hardware for the use case. I mean, there are ready nodes and all kinds of other solutions, but sometimes the ready node configuration doesn't exactly match what you need. And you need to be careful with some of these vendors because they might upgrade individual devices. That was one case we had, and all of a sudden that version was no longer supported. So we had to fight the battle of, is it now the fault of the hardware vendor versus VMware and everything else? Those are scenarios where I can always only warn people is stick very strict with what's in the HCL. Because yes, it's nice that VSAN tells you in the UI that you are in an unsupported state, but at that point you have the hardware already in your racks and cabled up and in production. So you should identify that early on. But I think that's going to get better as well. When we talk about improvements for VSAN, I would still say there is some way to go from a at least stability perspective. Adding all these new features is nice, but I think we are now at the level that most of the features you need in production are there. Stability not from a day-to-day operations perspective, but more from a supportability perspective, because currently some of the support scenarios require you to more or less completely evacuate hosts or the complete cluster, and that sometimes can be a stretch. So that would clearly be an improvement if the support teams were given additional tools to make that easier. Dashboards are there, we use VROPs as well, so we have all the beauty out of the capacity planning and everything over there. So that's not really something where I think we need a lot of other things. Upgradability could be sometimes a bit easier we are now there that VSAN can be updated without ESXi, but there are still enough dependencies. So that would be good if that actually would be uncoupled even more. ROI, I think, is difficult for us to deal with because by the way we approach and what we do in our business with test and demo cases and all that kind of stuff, it's hard for us to judge because some of the hardware and stuff we get also during tests is actually provided by vendors. So I don't necessarily have what a normal end customer would pay for it. We still pay for the stuff, but it's a different story. Yeah, so ROI from an administrative perspective is clearly much better because I only have to deal with one user interface. I can actually go into one place, be on top of it for some scenarios, even use vCloud Director. So it's much easier to use VSAN from that perspective because it's all in the vSphere client. I configure my profiles, I can use them on all the other tools. Whereas in the legacy storage approach, I still have to deal with all these additional details on each individual storage. And that can be challenging, even though some of these vendors provide integration into the vSphere client. In many ways, that's just the HTML UI of their storage device in the vSphere client. That's not really integration. It's still a different UI. It's still a different training effort. Somewhere around, 8, I think, is the perfect place. There is room for improvement, but with the current versions, I think we are on a good stage.